Hello everyone, welcome to another episode on Lapetina Presents. I have a special guest. His name is William Wagener, creator on the Second Thought TV from Santa Maria, California. He is a journalist, independent journalist since 2001, fighting for freedom of speech, covering topics from politics, geopolitics, and unfair trials prosecutions. He was one of the first honest journalists who attended the Michael Jackson 2005 trial, one of the first journalists who exposed Michael Jackson's innocence during trial 2005 in Santa Barbara, California. Hello, William. How are you? Thank you for attending to my show. How are you?
I'm doing good this beautiful Sunday, Angelina. You're looking good too.
Oh, thank you so much. We have been friends since 2009, so I'm so honored to having you. And
Been a
thanks to
long time.
you, yes, and thanks to you, you are one of my main inspirations to do this career as a journalist, presenter. Thank you so much for being my friend.
You're welcome. I didn't know at the time I went to the Michael Jackson trial. I didn't know what the facts really were. I just wanted to know what the truth was.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a rare, I didn't realize at the time that was a rare commodity. I didn't realize that most of the journalists there had an attitude that Michael had to be guilty because otherwise they couldn't sell books.
Mm-hmm.
Finding him guilty was their way of getting book deals and making money on books.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have any motivation to write a book, though I'm now writing a book. I keep rewriting it. It hasn't published yet, about the trial of Michael Jackson in 2005. Actually, it wasn't his first trial. He had been to court several times before that, where maids and other people that worked for him would steal things from him.
Mm-hmm.
While they're cleaning his house, they would steal things and then sell them on something like eBay. And he got angry about it when one of them accused him of something. And so she sued him and he sued her and she won. And that trial was very quiet because Michael won and you didn't hear anything about it. But when the boy's mother, Janet Arvizo, decided a brand new Bronco that Michael gave her so she could travel to the hospital to see her son who was dying from brain cancer, Michael invited him to Neverland. He was nothing but good to those kids, and those kids were just losers. They were down and outers from a down and out mother. I often go by Neverland and stand by the split rail fence because that split rail fence is still there. It's been there for 25 years and it's still there. And during the testimony of Janet Arvizo, the mother of the accusers, who coached them to accuse Michael of wrongdoing, she testified she could not escape from Neverland. When the testimony came out, she was a guest, had free food, free vehicles, free lodging at Neverland for months at a time. She said, "Oh no, I was a prisoner. My sons were prisoners." And they asked her, "Well, why didn't you just walk out and leave?" She said, "Oh, there was a high wall. You couldn't get over the high wall." Well, there's only a high wall for about 30 feet around the main gate. Beyond that main gate, and the high wall is only about 6-7 feet high, but to the left and the right of the main gate, there's a split rail fence, and she could have easily just stepped through the split rail fence and walked away. And that sticks in my mind, how she thought the jury was so stupid they would believe that he was hiding behind a high wall and covered 2,800 acres with a high wall, and she was held a prisoner against her will. And as the trial just went on, there was just so many bad lies. And Susan Yu and attorney Thomas Mesereau Jr. just tore her apart, shredded her. And all you would hear on ABC and CBS, and especially that horrible TV station that nobody watches anymore, CNN, I don't think anybody looks at it anymore. They destroyed themselves with, what's his name, Don Diamond, and the brother of the former governor, murderer of New York State, Como. Those two destroyed that channel with the continual lie after lie. But the Michael Jackson trial, I went there thinking, well, he probably did something wrong. He's very rich and he's never had a normal life. He probably did something wrong. He probably gave those boys some wine and got them drunk. And as the truth came out day after day, I began to get a very clear picture. Michael was 100% innocent. But that's not what you were hearing on CNN. All these, oh, Michael's accused of this, Michael's accused of that. And in the end, it was all lies. Michael was accused, yeah, and for like one startling thing. There were many startling things, but one of them was that Gavin Avizo and his brother claimed that Michael had got the boy in the bed with Michael, and they only had underpants on, and then they supposedly took their underpants off, and he got him erotically aroused by showing him a Playboy type magazine I'd never heard of before the trial, because I don't particularly collect a lot of pornography. And that magazine was called Barely Legal, and I'd never heard of Barely Legal before. But it had a date in the upper corner. And before they got to the date on the magazine, Thomas Mesereau had the boy answer at least 7 or 8 times, maybe a dozen times, when did you last go to Neverland? Whether Michael was there or not, when was the very last time you ever went to Neverland? And the boys gave a date. It was like December. And then they waffled and said, well, maybe it was the following January, or maybe it was the following March. The next day, the boy's on the stand again, and Thomas Mesereau, the defense attorney, a great attorney, he redeemed my faith in attorneys, because I was rapidly reaching the point where I just didn't trust any attorney, didn't believe that any of them were worth 10 cents. And Thomas Mesereau redeemed my faith, at least in him and Susan Yu, his co-counsel. And he asked the boy, okay, so you were last at Neverland, what date? And the prosecutor objected. That's been asked and answered. Judge Melezva sustained, said, yeah, you've asked that enough. Next question. So the next question was, okay, and that's the magazine. They put the picture of the cover of the magazine, Barely Legal, up on the wall so everybody in the courtroom could see it. And that's the magazine Michael gave you to get you aroused. Yes, he said, yes. And then Thomas Mesereau said, would you look in the upper right-hand corner and read the date of the magazine? Would you read that to the jury? And the point is, and tell the jury what the date. So the boy, he turned around, he looked up at the date, and he turned back. And this isn't on the court record, because nothing was said. And the boy looked at the prosecutor, Thomas Snake Smedden, and he looked at him and he shrugged his shoulders and went. And then he looked at the jury and he kind of looked around like, now what do I do? And Thomas Mesereau repeated the question, would you tell the jury what the date is? And he sort of mumbled, October. Well, the date was October after the last January he had last been at Neverland. So if the magazine hadn't been published the 6, 7, 8, 9 months later, how could have Michael given him that magazine in bed? Everybody knows Playboy, Hustler, Barely Legal, and all these girly magazines, they don't publish the date on the magazine and then put the magazine out 8, 9 months in advance. At the max, they put it out maybe 1 month in advance,
Mm-hmm.
but not 7, 8, 9 months. And that was, to me, like, these guys just don't know how to lie at all. They're really bad liars. They know
So,
how to tell a lie, but they're doing a really bad job because out of their own mouth, they prove themselves to be absolutely untrustworthy, unreliable. And I could see the women in the first row of the jury. They were like, "Oh my God!" They're rolling their eyes. They're looking up at the ceiling. How much longer? I could see what they were thinking.
mm-hmm.
The jury's thinking, how much longer do we have to listen to this lie after lie? We've been here for months, and all we're getting is lies. Well, Thomas Mesereau put in several motions for a directed acquittal. And Judge Melville, I'm sorry, I said Melesva before, I meant to say Melville, which means bad village. Santa Maria is a bad village. Melville. Some things are still very sharp in my mind, but I get the names mixed up sometimes. Anyway, Judge Melville refused to give a directed not guilty verdict. He wanted the jury to get to decide. Also, Melville was prejudiced in favor of the prosecutor because they were old golfing buddies. Mm-hmm. They used to golf together. They were young attorneys together 40 years ago. And one of them decided to become a prosecutor and the other one decided to become a judge. The whole trial was a farce. Mm-hmm. And after the second week, the National Japanese channel packed up and went home and asked them why they're leaving. The trial isn't over. I said, this is all bullshit. This is just bullshit. And our sponsors aren't going to pay to broadcast bullshit. That's basically what the Japanese national, their number one TV channel, pulled out. And then there was 2 or 3 more channels from Europe. They pulled out and said, this is all bullshit. And so we had open spaces because the city was making money off the trial because the city owned the parking lot and the courthouse, and they were renting out parking spaces to the national media. Mm-hmm. So the city wanted the trial to go on and on and on because there was a lot of extra money for the city of Santa Maria. Mm-hmm. The thought that they were allowing an innocent man to be prosecuted didn't bother the corrupt city of Santa Maria. And that's part of the reason. I'm not afraid to speak out that the city I live in is a very corrupt city, extremely corrupt. The whole county's corrupt.
So besides that county, city, do you think there was other people they get benefits for Michael to be persecuted?
Oh yeah, the city made money. All the motels were full. The motels loved it because the trial started January 31st, mm-hmm. and that's the dead season here. We are a summer season, usually in December, January, February, and March. They have a 60% or greater vacancy rate. You know, they're only renting 20 to 40% of the rooms. Mm-hmm. And that's mostly only on the weekends. Mm-hmm. So when the Jackson trial came here, all the rooms got bought up by the media. They're big tycoons and people. They had to have nice rooms. The attorneys that speak for NBC, ABC, Fox, they all had to have real nice motel rooms. So they had, virtually 100% occupancy and no vacancy. So that meant more bed taxes for the city. Plus the city was renting out the parking spaces on the courthouse parking lot. Each, I think they were getting $5,000 a month per parking space. Mm-hmm. And then they could set up their own white tent and all their cameras and leave it there day and night. Mm-hmm. And the city kept a policeman there to guard their equipment at night. It was a money-making deal for everybody except Michael Jackson. And it cost him, I believe, around $5 million to have Susan Yu and Thomas Mesereau defend him, though Thomas Mesro would never tell me the exact amount. He just said, even though Michael's dead, that's a confidentiality between me and my client, and I'm never going to tell you, William. And we're good friends. Thomas Mesro and I got to be good friends. We had a lot of dinners down in Hollywood together. We became very good friends after the trial. During the trial, Mesro wouldn't talk to me, and he only did one interview, and he regretted doing that interview, and he never did another one. He considered journalists a nuisance because all of them, except me, had an attitude that Michael's guilty and he's got to be found guilty and go to prison and die. And he would have died. And even Thomas Mesro said to me privately, if Michael had gone to prison, he would have been murdered. People that are known to be pedophiles and go to prison, they don't live long.
Yes, that's true.
Other prisoners will kill them because most of the people in jail had been abused as children, and that's why they went down the criminal path. But that trial was remarkable for a couple of reasons. You had a prosecutor that prior to Michael Jackson's trial had put three, not one, not two, but three innocent men in prison for child molesting, even though Thomas Snake Snedden, I always call him Snake because he slithered into court and he slithered out of court with this frozen smile on his face. He knew he was losing, but he put three innocent stepfathers in prison, even though he knew the stepfathers' accusers, their stepdaughters, had recanted and put in writing, I lied because I wanted to date an older boy that my dad didn't want me to go out with because he was only interested in sex, and I was only 15 or 14 or 16, and my stepfather was trying to protect me, and I made my mother miserable by putting my stepdad in prison. They recanted that, and still he prosecuted three innocent people.
And what is the point to do that? And for example, for those three people, they were wealthy people, or there was just
no, those were just average average men making an average income, and they had married a gal that already had children, and they saw that their daughter was going down a bad path to date boys that were 22 and 23 years old while they were like 14, 16 years old. And he said, no, you can't go out with them. So the stepdaughters in these other cases accused their stepfather of molesting them. And then their mother said, what are you doing? Why are you lying? You're taking my husband away and putting him in jail. What are you doing? And the girl said, okay, I lied. But Snedden didn't care. Snake Snedden said, no, we're not going to tell the defense about their writing a letter saying I lied. They kept that away from the defense.
So do you think...
And these three men served a total, I don't know what each one did, but the total was 25 years in state men's prison for something they didn't do, something they were trying to protect their stepdaughters from. That came out after the Michael Jackson trial, I think. And they had a very short hearing. It lasted about an hour. And they were allowed to undo the trial and then enter a not guilty plea. And they all agreed, okay, the judge said, okay, you're not guilty. You're free to leave. You don't have to go back to prison. But they'd already spent 25 years, the three of them together, in prison. That's the kind of rotten son of a bitch snake prosecutor Thomas Snake Snedden was. And now he's going after Michael Jackson.
Question. Do you think by persecuting these three men, let's speak about before Michael Jackson, do you think that he received any incentive or any reward doing that?
Well, somebody called him on a private cell phone that seems to be related to Michael Jackson's former manager. I can't say who was speaking on that phone number, but we know a phone call went from them to Thomas Snake Snedden, on a certain date, shortly after Michael fired his manager and ordered him to turn everything over to his new attorney. Shortly after that, I can't remember how many days after that, that manager got even with Michael by calling, at least that's my theory, someone on that cell phone registered to a certain office where a certain manager, very well-known person, a very well-known attorney, controlled that number. Now, who was speaking on that phone? I don't know. But they made a call to Snedden shortly after that, according to Snedden. Snedden's girlfriend, he decided to prosecute Michael. Snedden had a girlfriend that worked in the DA's office part-time. And when he wasn't banging his mistress or his wife, he was banging this girlfriend in the office, the DA's office. And he wouldn't keep her there full time. And she got angry because Snedden had promised this girlfriend, I'll get you a full-time job with a pension, you know, spread your leg sort of thing. And I'll make sure you get it. Well, she never got it. And she was pissed. She was looking for a way to get even with Snedden. So she found me on YouTube, you know, doing a regular show out of Santa Maria, which is part of Santa Barbara County. And she contacted me and I said, you got to get him on audio tape. You got to trap him and get him on audio tape, because just you saying it doesn't make it true. And she never could quite get what she wanted out of Snedden's mouth on tape. And then she never got hired back at the DA's office, and she was really pissed. She never got the pension, and she never got the permanent job. He was a snake. He was a truly awful human being. And to see somebody like that prosecute somebody like Michael Jackson, who gave away tens of millions of dollars to children's charities. Snedden never gave children's charities a dime. But there was another factor to this besides that. And I think this was the bigger factor. Right before the Jackson trial started, there was a, what do you call it, in the Roman Catholic Church, where the young boys go and they train to become priests. I forget the word now. I got video of their entrance way down in Goleta. It's not far from the sheriff's office. And a whole bunch of boys have been molested there for over 10, 15 years. And then they became men and got married. And then they had problems in their marriage because of their homosexual abuse at that place. Well, those boys, there was like over 100 of them. And I only spoke to 3 or 4 of them. And the 3 or 4 I spoke to, only one of them was part of the lawsuit. The others didn't want their name on a class action lawsuit against the Archbishop of Santa Barbara Diocese. Well, that trial was quickly covered up by bringing Michael to trial and pointing the finger at Michael and pointing the finger at Michael. Pretty soon, nobody was paying attention to this gigantic, huge case where dozens of priests would come and be at this place in Goleta. I forget the name of it. I'm sorry. I'm getting old. And they would molest these boys, some in the showers, where they're supposed to be learning to be clergymen. They were learning to be groomed by pedophile priests. And there was a lawsuit, and it was settled out of court. And as a result of this, the diocese took huge amounts of their property and finances and hid them, put them in private accounts. And we're still seeing spin-off problems from that. The church hid a lot of their stuff, so it couldn't be used and liquidated to settle this lawsuit. Still, it was, nobody knows how many hundreds of millions of dollars for this class action lawsuit. And that was all forgotten as the Michael Jackson trial ramped up and kept getting bigger and bigger. And pretty soon, nobody was paying any attention to this lawsuit against the Roman Catholic Church Diocese of Santa Barbara. But there
So,
were at least 100 boys molested, and I believe there was over 80 or 90 part of the lawsuit. All that got covered up,
so do you
and no
think?
one.
No, I'm sorry for interruption. So, do you think they used the Michael Jackson trial just to keep the people entertained while they are hiding all this corruption?
Absolutely.
So,
There
it's,
is no question in my mind about it. And here's the reason. At that time, there was a sheriff who was getting, a sheriff of Santa Barbara, who was getting a divorce. And it was a pretty ugly divorce. She had filed, and usually you have to answer the divorce filing within 90 days. 6 months had gone by, and the sheriff had not answered the divorce motions, which is really kind of unusual. Then all of a sudden, he moved out of the house. Well, he moved out of the house earlier and moved in with his girlfriend. He took his horse. He had a horse and a barn for the horse at his place out near Los Olivos, about 6 miles from Neverland. And he moved in with his girlfriend, and just so his wife that was divorcing him was all alone. And I started a conversation with her, and I wanted to get her on film. And I was talking to her on the phone, and I wanted to come out that night and get her on film. She knew stuff about the Michael Jackson case. She knew stuff about the sheriff and the district attorney, Snake Snedden. And she was all gung-ho to tell me. She just didn't want to do it because her hair wasn't fixed. And I'm like, who cares about your hair? What you know is critically important. Let me come out tomorrow then. She said, no, tomorrow I'm going shopping with a girlfriend. And then the next day I've got an appointment to get my hair done. And then she suddenly was dead. We made an appointment for about 6 or 7 days in the future. And before that date came, allegedly, she committed suicide in the garage. Just turned her car on, shut all the doors, and went to sleep and died. Allegedly. I wrote a letter to the authorities saying, since the sheriff of the counties knows everybody in the coroner's office, and they're all buddies, it would be appropriate to have a coroner and a sheriff coroner, it's the same job, sheriff coroner, from Kern County or Ventura County or some other county come over and do this investigation. They ignored my letter, and it was declared a suicide by the same buddies that all buddy with the sheriff, because they all work for the sheriff. They all know each other. And I asked the lawyers, did you hear about this? Going into the courthouse, going into the same courthouse Michael had his trial. I see lawyers I know, and I say, do you think this, did you know this? The wife of the sheriff committed suicide, allegedly? And they said, no, I didn't hear anything about it. It was that covered up. And I called the sheriff's office, and I can't remember if it was they put me on with a public information officer who used to work for CBS Local here. I don't know if it was him or the guy before him, but he answered, oh, please, Mr. Wagener, we're just trying to keep this all quiet. I hope you'll join us and agree that we're just all going to be quiet about this. It's so bad that the sheriff's wife committed suicide during the divorce. Let's just not talk about it, was what he was telling me. Please shut your mouth, Wagener. And I was like, really? That doesn't make me want to believe she committed suicide. That makes me believe the exact opposite. Then there was a lawyer that Michael knew in Las Vegas. He suddenly decided to commit suicide. I forget his name, but there was a bunch of people that were connected to Michael, all very quickly started committing suicide.
So, in other words, just a personal opinion that made me think that this is more further than just the benefit of the accounting, I think this is more further, more deep, more related to
It
the
is. It's
shadows, to
much
the dark
deeper.
shadows.
Either, you know, or it was just really convenient that Michael fired his manager, and certain phone calls were made from certain private cell phone lines at a time when the Catholic Church needed a major cover up. And how better to cover up pedophile Catholic priests than to have the number one largest celebrity in the world suddenly charged with pedophilia?
Yes,
I,
because I'm thinking, why not why Michael and not somebody else? So
because Michael was the largest name and he had a home in
and
Santa
clean
Barbara County.
and clean
It was just
because
all so very convenient. Also, there were a lot of wealthy billionaires in the county and people that did businesses with the billionaires in Los Olivos, which is like 4.5, 5 miles from Neverland Gate. And when Michael was there, he would frequently invite ghetto kids, really the poorest of the poor, black kids out of South Central LA. They'd bring them up by the busload and they'd let them play at Neverland, ride all the rides, go see the animals in his private zoo, his petting
yes.
zoo, and ride the merry-go-round and the Ferris wheel. And he had all this. He had his own fair out there at Neverland. And these kids, they'd come out of the ghetto and get to go to see,
Yes,
not
yes.
only see Michael, have free food, all the food they can eat, ride all the rides. But then after the bus would stop and they'd leave to go back to Los Angeles, which is about a 130-mile drive, they would stop in Los Olivos, where all the rich merchants were selling stuff to the rich billionaires. And then have all these little poor black kids running through and touching everything and making noise. And it's a very white area, the San Ynez Valley, except for the Chumash Indians. The Chumash Indians have a large casino, and I championed them because they were opposed by the white people. They didn't want a gambling casino in San Ynez. It was a white enclave, and they like to keep it that way. And I championed and had the former chief of the tribe on my show, interviewed him out there, and they finally got their casino going. When they first started, they were under a tent, and then after I did my interview, they proceeded with their legal proceedings. Then they had like 5 or 6 acres left that they still had under Chumash control. That was not part of the county. And they literally covered that with a big tent, and the tent turned into a permanent building, and it's still out there. And the Chumash are making a lot of money, or the people they call Chumash. My understanding is there are no full. So Michael wasn't the first person of color that I championed. I just like seeing people get justice. And Michael wasn't getting justice in the media. They would always, Michael's accused of this and Michael's accused of that. And the next day, Mesro would prove they're liars, and they wouldn't mention the liars getting caught in their lies. And I got really upset about that. So I started doing interviews with fans that went to the trial, other people connected to the trial, and I'd let them speak what they saw. I saw it too, but I might be accused of being biased. So I would have different people that came from different countries or different states. And it was very clear to me that Michael was being ramrodded, just like those 3 average guys that spent a total of 25 years in prison for something they absolutely didn't know and didn't do. And Snake Sneddon knew they didn't do it, and he prosecuted them anyway.
Yes.
He just liked to be a victorious prosecutor so he could tell the people, re-elect me, I put all these pedophiles in jail. No, he was putting good people in jail while the real pedophiles were going free. And that upset me. And it's still, to this day, I think you can see, it still upsets me. And I was getting, to the point where I would start to pray that God kill all lawyers, kill all prosecutors, just make them all die. And then I watched Thomas Mesereau and his partner, Susan Yu. They're not partners anymore, but they were in 2005, I think, till 2006 or 7. I watched those two do a very good job, left no stone unturned, proved every accusation a falsehood and a lie. I think the worst thing you could hear in that trial, and it's part of the record, is there was testimony that they went swimming in the pool, Michael and one of the Advisio boys, I forget which one, and then some other boy that showed up at the trial later and claimed Michael didn't do anything. Mm-hmm. And there was a security guard or somebody testified they'd both taken a shower after they got out of the chlorine-filled pool, and then their underpants was left in the shower. Mm-hmm. And there was an implication that maybe something happened in the shower, but there was no testimony they were in the shower doing anything to each other together. That was probably the worst thing that came out. But after all the lies, the magazine being published 6, 7, 8, 9 months after the boy said it was used to get him aroused, well, they don't publish magazines 7 months in advance. It was an obvious, blatant, stupid lie. And when the boy looked at the prosecutor, he didn't look at the jury. He looked at the magazine. He looked at Tom Snake Snedden and going, well, what do I do? What do I do? He's shrugging his shoulder. I could see Snake Snedden go, oh, no. He put his head down. He could see his whole thing was falling and crumbling. Mm-hmm. It was just horribly. And one of the first things I'm going to do on my podcast is play all my original TV shows from 2005 that dealt specifically with the Michael Jackson trial, so people can see exactly what I was saying. And I would often say, come on, Mr. Snedden, show me just one witness, just one that doesn't get caught in their own lies. And the next day I'd see Snedden in court and he'd look at me and he'd say, we'll get that damn son of a bitch Wagener. We'll get him with his trial, so we'll get that Wagener. He didn't realize I could read lips because I had a brother who was deaf and couldn't hear, and he taught me to read lips. So, but he's quietly saying, we'll get that son of a bitch. I was reading his lips and I was thinking, oh, really? You're going to get me, huh? And the next week I'd go and do it again. Snedden, and when Snedden lost that trial on every count, and people forget this, although they started the trial with 10 felony counts, they finished the trial with 10 felony counts and 4 lesser included misdemeanors. And when a prosecutor goes through 5 months of trial, and in the last week or two, he says to the judge, we're going to now put in 4 misdemeanors because the standard of proof for misdemeanors is less. And the maximum trial in California, the maximum jail time you can get in California for a misdemeanor is 1 year instead of many, many, many years for a felony. He knew he was going to lose all the felonies. He knew that before the jury went out because he hadn't proved all the elements. You have to prove all the elements beyond the shadow of a doubt, and he hadn't done that, any of the 10 felonies. So he included 4 misdemeanors. That's like begging the jury, please, jury, don't let me lose this case. At least give me 1 misdemeanor conviction so I can say I convicted Michael. And the jury was buying none of it, and it was a mostly white jury. I think there was maybe 1 or 2 people of Latino descent, and I think the one Latino man was the jury foreman, if I remember rightly. He seemed to be Latino of origin. He looked kind of Latino. But all the rest of the jurors were mostly white. And they found this very black man from a very black Jackson family not guilty on everything. And they were pissed. And I interviewed some of the jurors later, not all at the same time, but I went privately and met them in different places and interviewed them. Some went on tape, some didn't want to be on tape. And the only one was the eldest Anglo-white woman. I can't think of her name right now. I interviewed her. I can't think of her name. Got her on tape. She used to be a judge's clerk, or judge clerk, a judge's clerk in another county. And she was the main holdout to find Michael guilty.
Mm-hmm.
And the other jurors kept asking her, based on what? Based on what? All the evidence proves he's not guilty.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it turned out she had a book deal with somebody out of LA.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the same guy that's got a show on Fox.
Mm-hmm.
And they were going to ghostwrite a book for her about how evil Michael was. All they needed her to do is find Michael guilty, and she had a multi-million-dollar book deal. All written. She didn't have to do the work. All she had to do is vote Michael guilty, get the verdict to come out guilty, and she was going to make $1 million. And she's living in a mobile home here in Santa Maria, and I interviewed her at her mobile home. She's dead now. Cook, that was her last name. Her last name was Cook. Ella or Emma Cook, I can't remember. I interviewed her, and she basically confessed, yeah, I had a book deal. Then she went on national TV after interview and tried to say, oh, yeah, I really thought Michael was guilty, and there was another guy from the jury. Yeah, I really kind of thought Michael did something bad to somebody sometime.
Mm-hmm.
We just didn't have the evidence. All the time they had a website, the prosecutor, Snake Stettin, had a website out begging any other victims worldwide. You can see this. Said, please call us.
Mm-hmm.
And they got a few calls. But when they interviewed these people, it was clear they were full of bullshit in their head.
Mm-hmm.
And most of these people saying, yeah, Michael molested me too. And they'd ask him where, when, and it turned out they'd never even met Michael. They'd never even been within 100 yards of Michael.
Mm-hmm.
They just thought they could get in on this famous trial and make a name for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
It was really pathetic how many people were willing to sell out their soul for a little bit of fame and a little bit of money. It made me happy that he was found not guilty.
Mm-hmm.
I knew it from about the end of the third or fourth week. There was no doubt in my mind Michael was not going to be found guilty. I didn't even go in to hear the jury. I stayed outside to get the crowd reaction. And I remember Thomas Mesro asked me, oh, weren't you in the court for the jury verdict? I said, no. I already knew what the verdict was be. I wanted to get the crowd reaction outside because it was 200 or 300 fans had gathered. Some had hung on, stayed a week, 2 weeks longer than they planned. Most fans stayed for a day or two just to see Michael go in and out and wave at Michael. And they'd go back to Switzerland or Spain or Mexico or Canada, wherever they came from. But that last week when the jury was out deliberating, people would come for a day or two and they said, oh, they're going to get a decision. Then they would extend their motel, stay longer, spend more money in the community, which was fine for the business people of Santa Maria. They loved it. All these fans spending money, all the media booking all the expensive motel rooms. So I think that pretty well covers it. I mean, to do that, to see more, you have to read my book because there's a lot more, but I'm saving for the book, Angela.
Yes,
but those were a couple of critical things that if you had just been there the right day at the right time, you would have shook your head and said, this trial shouldn't even be happening. The trial was the crime. Having a trial was the crime. The only good thing out of this is after the trial, Judge Melville and Snake Stettin were no longer friends. They'd had a friendship going back 35, 40 years, and that friendship ended on a certain day when there was a witness on the stand. I think it was a prosecutor's witness, and I'd have to read my own book to get the name, but Snake Stettin asked him a question, said, isn't this true and this true? That proves that Michael made that call. And the guy said, no, and your chart of the phone call is wrong. And this was the prosecutor's witness. And he's saying, you got it wrong. He was so upset. And then Thomas, he said, well, let's strike all that from the record. And Thomas Mesereau, the defense attorney, said, objection, Your Honor. The jury's already heard it. You can't unhear it. So let it stay on the record. more of the lies caught in open trial, they stay on the record. And he was mad. Snedden was so angry, he started turning in circles. He just started walking in a little circle, going around and around. Well, we know this, and I know that, and we know this is true, and we know that is true. And all the time, Snedden's turning in circus. Judge Melville is raising his fingers, trying to get his attention, saying, stop, stop, stop. You're testifying. You're supposed to be asking questions, not testing. You're not on the witness chair. And he's raising his finger. I've never seen Melville raise his finger. He's a very calm, very cold fish. He knows how to be a good judge. He isn't always a good judge, but he knows how to be a good judge. And he was trying to raise his finger, and I could see his finger trying to get Snedden's attention. But Snedden's going around and around, and I knew Snedden had blew a fuse. He had lost it. He knew he had lost the trial, and he was trying to get his witness to say something so they could get conspiracy charges by saying Michael made this phone call to this, and this is connected. And his own witness said, no, you've got these all wrong. Your chart's all wrong. And Snedden lost it. And at that point, there was no doubt in my mind. And then finally, Thomas Mesereau said, objection, Your Honor. He's testifying. If Thomas Snedden wants to testify, let's put him on the witness stand and swear him in. He's testifying and he's not under oath, and the jury heard all this. And then the judge said, oh, we're going to take a break. And he sent the jury out really quick. Get the jury out of the courtroom. And then the Melville said, I'll see you in chambers, Mr. Snedden, immediately. And that was to get called into chambers. And then an afterthought, I think as he's walking out, the judge said, you can come too, Mr. Mesereau, because he can't have a secret meeting with one side when the other side isn't represented. So they both went out, and that's when, and Thomas Mesereau didn't tell me this, but a clerk that happened to be walking into the back office told me about it. That's when Judge Melville gave Snedden a verbal spanking. Like, what are you doing? You can't do that. And from a man of 25 years experience as you can't do that. You know better than that, Mr. Snedden. And I'm sure Mesereau was just standing there smiling from ear to ear as the judge, bitch slapped his buddy, the prosecutor. But Mesereau didn't tell me that. I got that from a clerk. That was a clerk for a different judge. It happened to be going through the back rooms and saw it and heard it. And then she was told to leave. They didn't want her hearing what's going on, but she heard as the door closed, she could hear what was going on. So living here, I got to see and talk to people that know things that are not on the record. One more thing before you go on to other issues I want to tell you about. Show you how crazy this ghetto family, the Vizos were. I'm not saying ghetto family because they were Latino descent. They just were from a very poor mentality. It's not that all Latinos are bad people or ghetto people, but this family was. And that was I don't know how to do it here. It's easier to do if I'm in the studio, but there was a railing along by the jury box. And the witnesses walked up right in front of the jury to get on the witness stand. And Janet Arvizo, the mother of the two boys that are accusing Michael, also mother of the sister, she had walked up to testify, and she dragged her hand along that railing, touching the railing as she went, that the first row of jurors had their knees propped up against. Some of them was, lay back in their chairs and they put their knee up on that railing. And she was touching it as like, oh, look, I'm touching you. You're touching me. You can trust me. I'm Janet Arvizo, the mother of these wonderful children. and you can believe what I say. Well, she was completely unbelievable. And I've never seen a witness touch the railing, the jury railing before. I've seen lots of trials, and this is the first time I've ever seen this happen. And I wonder if she wasn't coached, because a week or two later, Janet Avizio's mother testified, and she did the same thing and dragged her hand along the railing. And they did it looking over their shoulder like this at the jury, you know. like the silent movie gal in the silent movie, Gloria Swanson used to do that. When she would drag her hand along the railing. And I'm like, what is this? Do they only watch silent movies from the 1920s? You know, and the mother and the grandmother did the same thing. No other witness in the trial touched the jury railing as they walked up. It was, and that's not on the court record. You won't see it on the court record because nothing was spoken. The court record only gives you what was said on the witness stand or by the judge or the two sides of attorneys. So, you know, it was such a theatrical bunch of bullshit. It's, I shouldn't say bullshit, but it's Sunday. I shouldn't use that word, but it's, you know, I looked at that and I said, God had a hand in this. God knew he needed Thomas Mesereau and Susan Yu because the attorney he had before this was a media hound. I'm not going to give the name of that attorney because I don't want to get sued, but he was a media hound, and Michael knew it, and him and his brother Randy interviewed in Florida Thomas Mesereau, according to what Mesereau told us, and they decided to hire Mesereau and Yu. And it was a really good move for Michael because that other attorney, I don't trust him. Just don't trust him. And I never heard of this long white-haired guy, Thomas Mesereau. Never heard of him before this trial. I don't go watch trials in LA for fun. There's enough trials to watch all over this country that, you know, I hate to go to LA in the first place. And right now it's really a hellhole with the DA that's letting murderers, carjackers, and rapists out of jail every day. Just letting them out to rape and murder. I've been asked to go down, and they would pay me if I would come and tape things in LA, in Orange County, and I won't go to LA. Just won't go to that county. It's just a really wicked, evil place where people can shoot you, beat you, and kill you, and they'll be let go the next day, especially if you're not the right kind of journalist. If you don't sing the awoke song. And so I just don't go there. Just don't go there. So that's all I want to say about the Michael Jackson trial. I hope you get my book someday, and I hope you tune into my podcast where I'm going to play all those shows right from 2005, just the way they happened.
Sadly, we lost internet connection, but don't worry about it. He will be back in future shows. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook and also here in YouTube. And I will see you next time.